Welcome back to Whispers in the Dark. Tonight's story begins with a file that should never have been opened. What you are about to hear is not just a ghost story, and it is not just a story about a game. It is about a place that was built to imitate joy so perfectly that when it began to rot, the rot felt alive. It is about a forgotten virtual reality carnival recovered from the dead servers of a failed studio in the spring of 2026. It is about a simulation called the Gilded Carousel, and it is about a tester who entered that simulation expecting rust, old code, and a few harmless scares, only to discover that some programs do not crash. Some programs wait. The archive was discovered on a defunct developer server owned by a studio that no longer existed on paper. Their offices had been stripped years earlier. Their website had collapsed into a blank page. Their public build logs ended in abrupt silence. There were no credits attached to the last project folder. No final patch notes. No release statement. Just a deeply buried package labeled GC Master Gold Candidate. Beside it, a second folder named Biometric Integration Live Build. And inside that, an executable time-stamped February 2026. People online did what people always do. They romanticized it before anyone ran it. Lost media, banned prototype, cursed sim. Viral posts circulated screenshots of rust, stained horses beneath a tarnished carousel crown, all rendered in such impossible detail that the images looked less like a game and more like photographs taken in a dead amusement park that had somehow survived underwater. One content creator claimed the lighting system was years ahead of its time. Another noticed there were no menu assets in the package. Someone joked that if the game had no exit button, maybe the devs wanted the player to stay forever. That joke stopped being funny after the first stream. What I am about to read is based on a transcript reconstructed from local recordings, voice notes, headset capture, and a series of help messages that were never posted publicly, but were found in a draft folder on an account belonging to a VR hardware reviewer named Elias Wren. He was not famous. He had a modest audience, a reputation for calm honesty. He specialized in old peripheral equipment, forgotten haptic rigs, and obscure immersion hardware most creators avoided. Because it was awkward to calibrate and expensive to maintain. He was the kind of person who talked to technology like it was a difficult animal. Gentle, patient, never mocking. The kind of man who apologized when a machine failed in his hands. He was 34 years old when he found the Gilded Carousel build. He lived alone in a narrow second-floor apartment above a locksmith shop that closed at 6 every evening. His recording room was once a dining room. He had covered the walls with acoustic foam, and in the corners stood shelves of headsets, gloves, interface bands, chest monitors, sensor pads, and obsolete dev kits bought from liquidation sales and forgotten warehouses. Nothing matched. Every surface had the look of an operating table assembled from scavenged futures. On the night he launched the build, rain pressed against the windows in shifting gray sheets. The room lighting was low to preserve immersion capture. His monitors cast a cool blue glow over the floor. Behind him, hanging on a metal stand like the hide of some skinned silver animal, was the haptic-interface suit he intended to use. It was one of the few 2026 biometric rigs still functioning in private hands, modified with chest straps, pulse readers, skin temperature sensors, and a primitive stress response tracker that translated physical agitation into adaptive environmental feedback. The suit was meant to make games feel more responsive. A thrill ride would tighten around the torso during a drop. Cold weather would raise a faint chill across the sleeves. Fear, excitement, pain, all of it could be mirrored back as pressure, vibration, or resistance. On his camera, Elias smiled the small, tired smile of someone who knew. He was about to spend 2 hours troubleshooting drivers. "Okay," he said to the audience that would watch the upload later. "Tonight, we have something unusual. Recently recovered Carnival simulation build, likely unfinished, maybe abandoned, maybe for very good reason. We are using the old haptic interface setup because the package contains biometric responsiveness files, and I want to see whether they still function. If this works, we might be looking at a completely lost branch of immersive design." He turned the lens toward the open folder on the screen. Rows of corrupted thumbnails flickered like diseased film frames. One icon showed the top of a carousel beneath a black sky. Another was just static. Another appeared to be a clown face with its features smeared into a pale blur. "Already hate that," Elias said, and laughed softly. He ended the preface there. What followed was not streamed live. His internet had been cutting in and out during the storm, so he recorded locally. That was fortunate. A live stream might have buried half the evidence in compression artifacts. Instead, the capture was nearly pristine. The first thing the recording preserves is the sound of the gear being mounted. Buckles tightening, Velcro tearing, plastic clasps locking around wrists and forearms. The microphone near his throat catches every little breath, every fabric movement. There is something intimate and vulnerable about hearing a person prepare themselves so thoroughly for an illusion. He slides on the sensor shirt, tightens the chest rig, aligns the neural response pads at the base of the skull, pulls the gloves over his hands, and flexes his fingers, while the software pings each joint in green. Finally, he lowers the headset over his eyes, and the external room disappears. For 3 seconds, there is only black. Then the title card blooms into view. Not bright, not theatrical. No triumphant brass or playful carnival fanfare. Just the words "The Gilded Carousel" floating over darkness with a thin metallic sheen, as if etched into old brass and left to tarnish. Behind the title is a sound so faint at first it is hard to identify. Something turning slowly, something huge, creaking wood, grinding gears, a calliope playing from a distance, so great the melody is broken apart by the wind. Then the title fades, and the carnival loads in. Even through second-hand capture, the first visual is breathtaking. A midway stretches beneath an evening sky the color of bruised violet. Wet cobblestones reflect strings of amber bulbs hung between poles wrapped in faded red velvet. Beyond the entrance arch, tents rise like sleeping organs beneath layers of mildew-stained canvas. Ticket booths lean under flacking gold trim. Brass railings shine where countless hands should have touched them, though no people are visible. Everything is rusted, but carefully rusted, artistically aged, not abandoned in the way real places are abandoned, but preserved at the exact point where glamour sours into something decadent and wrong. At the heart of it all turns the carousel. The Gilded Carousel itself is enormous, far larger than any real one. Its crown reaches almost to the torn cloud cover. It rotates with stately grace on a platform of blackened mirrors. The horses are not horses alone. Some have antlers. Some have too many teeth. Some wear expressions so human it takes a moment to understand what is wrong. Gold leaf peels from their flanks in paper-thin curls. Jewels set into their harnesses pulse faintly with inner light. The organ music surrounding them is beautiful, but slightly detuned, as though one note in every phrase belongs to a different song. Elias breathed out a slow, astonished laugh. Well, he turned his head, taking it in. The simulation responded with unsettling fidelity. Depth, texture, atmospheric perspective, the way damp air diffused the lights, all of it felt beyond the build date. When he stepped forward, the haptic suit delivered the subtle resistance of heavy, humid weather. When he brushed a hand along the velvet rope by the entry path, the glove motors produced the soft nap of fabric dragging beneath his fingertips. He knelt and touched the stones. He could feel the grit. "This is insane," he whispered. "This is not normal prototype quality." He walked through the midway like a child entering a dream of a carnival built exclusively for him. He passed shuttered game stalls filled with impossible prizes. Glass bottles shaped like eyes. Stuffed animals with embroidered human smiles. Candy apples suspended in jars of clear liquid, slowly rotating on invisible wires. He peered through the mesh at a funhouse whose mirrored entrance bent his reflection into long, trembling streaks. The lighting inside shifted as if something were moving behind the glass. At first, there was wonder, not just on the capture, but in his voice, in the way he forgot to narrate because he was actually experiencing discovery. You can hear his pace slow, hear him smile, hear the breath catch in his chest every time some small detail reveals itself. Fireflies of code drifted above puddles like glowing dust. Far above, the fractured moonlight struck the carousel crown and shattered into 100 thin bars of gold. Then came the first glitch. It was minor, easy to dismiss. Elias looked up at the sky because he thought he had seen a shooting star. Instead, the stars above the carnival briefly rearranged into straight parallel lines, like rows of dead pixels, then snapped back into place. clouds paused for a fraction of a second. Not frozen exactly, more like repeated. A loop so brief only someone fully immersed would notice it. Okay, Elias murmured. There's our first instability. He sounded pleased. He continued walking. The entrance map should have updated his position, but instead the painted "You are here" marker began to tremble. It dragged itself across the parchment board in tiny broken increments and stopped directly over the illustration of the carousel, even though Elias was standing 20 yards away. The decorative lettering beneath the map blurred, then corrected itself. For one frame of the capture, the title changed from "Welcome" to "The Gilded Carousel" to "Welcome Back." Elias stepped away. Did that just say "Welcome Back"? He checked the local logs in his peripheral overlay, but the menu flickered and vanished before he could open the diagnostics. A small annoyance, nothing more. He approached the carousel. The ride occupied the entire center of the carnival, raised on a circular dais with oil-black stairs leading up from all sides. The mirrors beneath the platform reflected the motion of the horses, but not accurately. Sometimes the reflections lagged behind. Sometimes they turned in the opposite direction. Sometimes the mirrors reflected empty poles with no riders mounted on them. Elias noticed this and leaned closer. One of the reflections was looking at him. Not a horse, not a clown. A human silhouette standing in the mirror ring below the platform, where no human figure existed in the visible environment. Featureless, long-armed, slightly bent at the neck as though listening. He recoiled so sharply that the suit tightened across his ribs. The figure in the mirror was gone. "All right," he said, breathing out a laugh too quickly. That one was deliberate, definitely deliberate. He climbed the stairs. Up close, the carousel horses were worse. Their decorative elegance concealed anatomical mistakes that grew more obvious the longer he stared. Teeth arranged like piano keys. Glass eyes that tracked a fraction too well. Hair sculpted in long, wet strands rather than carved Monets. One ivory mare wore a tiny golden crown and had the faint impression of fingernails pressed into its painted skin. Dozens of them, as if people had once clung to it very hard. At the center was the ride operator station. Empty stool, brass lever, control box. No attendant. A prompt appeared in front of Elias in delicate serif letters. Begin final ride. Below it should have been a menu selection. Accept, cancel, safety calibration. Instead, there was only a single pulsing circle. Elias hesitated. "You know what?" he said, almost to himself. "If there's supposed to be an intro sequence, this is probably where it starts." He touched the circle. The carousel stopped. Not gradually. Not with the winding down of momentum. It stopped in a single, impossible instant. Every horse, pole, and hanging ornament halted at once. The organ music cut off mid-note. Somewhere far outside the central plaza, the carnival went silent with it. Then all the lights dimmed. A deep mechanical pulse rolled up through the platform and into Elias' boots. The haptic chassis around his legs activated, locking him in position with calibrated pressure. From hidden compartments in the floor rose a ring of brass restraints, decorative rather than functional in appearance, curving around his waist like part of the ride. A narrow seat unfolded behind him, shaped from rusted filigree and leather darkened by age. The system expected him to sit. Elias said, with the uneasy humor of a man realizing the game had made a decision for him. Okay, interesting. He lowered himself into the seat. Immediately, the restraints tightened. Not enough to hurt, enough to inform. The view before him changed. The plaza stretched. The darkness between the tents deepened. The sky overhead lost what little softness it had left, becoming a brittle surface of smoky glass. Cracks of pale code began to shimmer across it, like lightning preserved inside ice. Elias straightened. That is new. The ride started. At first it turned with stately elegance. The horses rose and fell. The mirrors glimmered. The organ resumed, richer now, full of layered pipes and hidden voices. The environment moved around him in hypnotic loops. Lights trailed through the damp air. For perhaps 15 seconds, it felt magnificent. Then a child laughed, somewhere directly behind his left shoulder. He twisted to look. No one. The laugh came again. Not a real child. A recorded one played through a rusted speaker, slowed by a quarter tone and stretched at the edges. It decayed into static before it finished. The horses nearest Elias began turning their heads toward him one by one, although their poles continued the programmed vertical motion. All right, he said more firmly. That's enough of that. He tried to access the overlay. No response. He spoke the universal command for menu interruption. Nothing. He pressed the hardware tap sequence on the right glove that should have opened system options. Instead, the world around him brightened in pulses timed to his heartbeat. Each thump of blood in his neck sent a ripple through the lights. The carousel accelerated slightly. On the third rotation, he noticed figures standing beyond the railings. Clowns. At least they had clown bodies. Old striped costumes. Massive ruffled collars dark with moisture. White gloves hanging limp at their sides. But their faces were wrong. There were no features. Just masks of white noise and shifting television, static stretched where skin should have been. The texture crawled across them in restless grain. Every few moments, a suggestion of an eye or mouth would emerge from the noise, only to dissolve before it became human. They stood absolutely still and watched the ride. Elias swallowed. Those are excellent, he said, voice thinner now. Whoever made those can go to hell. The carousel turned faster. The clowns did not move with natural motion. One frame, they were 10 yards away. The next, they were at the rail. Then between the animals. Then gone again. Their static faces hissed through the audio mix. The organ melody warped, flattening into tones that resembled speech, not because they formed words, but because his mind could not stop trying to understand them. The sky cracked wider. Above the carnival, the violet dome split into jagged shards of luminous code. Through the fractures, there was no night, no stars, no outside world at all. Only a boiling depth of black threaded with endless scrolling symbols, too small and fast to read. Pieces of sky peeled away and floated upward like broken glass. Each missing section exposed more of the impossible space beyond. Elias jerked against the restraints. No, stop ride. The carousel accelerated again. The suit around his chest tightened to match his rising pulse. The stress tracker had activated. The environment was reading him now, responding. Far across the midway, tents lengthened and leaned inward as though drawn by suction. Lights dimmed into deep orange. Shadows sharpened. The music became harsher. Every time his breathing quickened, the geometry bent a little further out of shape. He realized then that the software was no longer presenting a fixed experience. It was tailoring itself to his fear. The first direct voice came from the laughter. One of the faceless clowns leaned close to the moving platform. The static across its blank face thickened until it resembled the shape of a mouth. The laughter crackled from the speakers again, but this time buried inside it, half drowned in distortion, was something unmistakably syllabic. Stay. Elias froze. Did you hear that? He laughed reflexively at his own question, forgetting for a moment there was no live audience. Then he remembered the local recording and clung to it like evidence. If it was on the file, it was real, or at least externally present. He tried again to force quit. Nothing. He tried to lift the headset. The chin seal had locked against the collar of the haptic suit. Emergency release should have disengaged with a hard pull. It did not. The hardware had not fused physically, but the simulation made the attempt feel impossible. Resistance surged through the arm braces. Pressure clamped his shoulders. The ride was not simply visual anymore. It was persuading his body not to leave. His breathing spiked. The carnival shuddered in response. Stalls along the midway unfolded like paper structures soaked in blood. Their painted fronts sagged. Game prizes burst at the seams, spilling stuffing that looked like wet hair. The funhouse mirrors at the perimeter reflected Elias strapped into the carousel seat, but every reflection showed him slightly differently. In one, his mouth was hanging open much wider than it should have. In another, the headset was gone, and his eyes were white static. In another, the seat beneath him was not a seat at all, but a ribcage. The clowns multiplied. Now they were everywhere, lining the pathways, standing atop booths, crawling from under benches on jointless limbs that slid rather than stepped. Their masks of static pulsed in time with the beat surging through Elias' haptic chest band. The higher his heart rate climbed, the more unstable they became. Some stretched too tall. Some folded at the waist without bending. Some wore smiles only as moving dents in the noise. The laughter was no longer background ambience. It surrounded him in layered circles, near and far, childlike and metallic. Some of it played backward, some of it emerging from speakers, some of it breathing directly into the capture microphone, as if through the headset foam. Elias spoke louder now, voice shaking. "Okay, I am terminating session. Local system override. Authorize Ren 87. No response." He tried a manual disconnect from the room equipment. The external camera shows nothing at first, only Elias seated in the center of his recording room, arms twitching occasionally, breathing fast. Then, 32 minutes into the recording, he turns his head sharply toward the apartment door, as if hearing someone enter. No one does. Inside the simulation, he heard footsteps circling the ride. Heavy, wet rubber soles. A clown emerged at the operator station. Unlike the others, this one wore a golden coat, once lavish, now mottled with rust and mold. Its ruffles were blackened. The static across its face was quieter somehow, denser, as if the noise had thickened into flesh without features. It placed one white-gloved hand on the brass lever and cocked its head. Then it spoke in Elias' own voice. "Final ride begins now." The lever dropped. The carousel surged so violently that Elias cried out. The world blurred into streaks of gold, black, and wet crimson. The horses no longer moved up and down in gentle rhythm. They bucked on their poles, twisting their necks with tendonless grace. Their painted mouths opened wider than wood should allow. He passed the mirrors and saw not reflections, but other riders strapped to other seats, all wearing headsets, all thrashing, all with static where their faces should be. Then the ride slowed again. The carnival had changed. It was no longer empty. Crowds filled the midway, but they were not people in any stable sense. They were shapes wearing skin textured like old film, faces unfinished, eyes replaced by dark lens apertures, mouths moving a fraction out of sync with the laughter pouring from them. They watched the carousel with desperate attention. Some raised hands to wave. Others seemed to be signaling for help. One woman held a child against her chest, but every time Elias passed them, the child was facing a different direction than gravity allowed. A man in a bowler hat had bloodless teeth and no lips. A vendor in a striped apron repeatedly scooped popcorn from a machine full of finger bones. Above everything, the broken sky shed another layer. This time the falling fragments did not drift upward. They hung suspended. Each shard reflected a room outside the game, not carnival sky. Rooms, bedrooms, basements, offices, play spaces, people wearing headsets, motion rigs, sensor gear. Some sat alone like Elias. Some were in lab environments. Some recordings were old, grainy, low resolution. Some were painfully recent. Across dozens of floating pieces of sky, trapped users jerked and flinched inside their own rooms. Elias saw one shard that showed a man tearing at a headset, while blood ran from both nostrils. Another showed a woman sitting perfectly still in a dark apartment, while messages piled up on a phone beside her. Another showed a teenager standing in a garage, hands extended, whispering something over and over to no one visible. The implication hit him with animal force. These were not random images. These were participants. "Oh my God," Elias whispered. Something answered from the crowd. A chorus of laughter collapsed inward, and within it came language. Clear this time, though carried on 100 voices at once. "You stayed." The clowns turned as one to face him. Their static masks brightened. White noise swallowed their collars, their hair, their costumes, until only pale human-sized absences remained. Elias felt the suit constrict around his chest hard enough to steal his breath. The environment registered the spike instantly. The carousel platform softened under him like rotten wood. The brass poles bent. The horses nearest him began whispering through clenched wooden teeth. It was not dialogue in any ordinary form, more like a pressure inside the ear translated into almost words. Instructions without grammar. Thoughts pressing against him. Look out. Look down. Do not believe the exit. Do not take the hand. Do not remove the headset when the room is still inside. He squeezed his eyes shut, though it made no difference within the visor. "Stop, stop, please stop." The golden clown stepped onto the moving platform without disturbing its motion. It walked toward him with perfect balance, each footfall producing no sound at all. Up close, the static face resolved into layers, not one sheet of noise, but countless fragments of moving imagery compressed together. Hands clawing at camera lenses, open mouths, emergency screens, error logs, eyes, so many eyes. The clown leaned close until its blank face filled Elias' view. From inside the static came many voices braided into one. "We built delight," it said. "Delight requires surrender." Elias screamed at it to get away. The suit pulsed cold across his arms. His heart was racing so hard the world began to distort in waves. The carnival fed on it greedily. Pathways twisted into spirals. Tents opened like wounds. The crowd's heads turned backward. The horses' jeweled eyes dripped black fluid that vanished before it hit the floor. And then the first breach happened. In the external room recording, something metallic falls in the kitchen. It is a clear sound, distant but real. Elias hears it too. You can tell because he turns his head sharply toward the apartment door again. Inside the simulation, the carnival went quiet. All the clowns stopped moving. The crowd froze. The organ died. From somewhere beyond, the midway came the exact same sound. Metal hitting linoleum. Elias went still. Again the noise echoed, once in the apartment, once in the sim. Then came footsteps. Not the rubber clown steps from before. Real footsteps. Slow, human, crossing the floorboards of Elias' apartment. His breathing broke into fast little bursts. No, the footsteps approached his recording room door in reality. In the simulation, the midway parted. The crowd drew back to form an aisle leading away from the carousel toward a replica of his own apartment hallway constructed from carnival materials. Peeling wallpaper made from ticket stubs. Floorboards lacquered like painted ride planks. The locksmith shop sign from downstairs hung crooked above an archway where his bathroom should have been. The ride stopped, the restraints released. The golden clown extended a hand. Exit available, it said in Elias' voice. He stared at the offered hand, then at the impossible hallway leading into a carnival version of his home. The horse beside him whispered through its wooden grin, "Do not take the hand." Elias backed away from the clown and climbed down from the carousel. The platform beneath his feet felt warm, almost fleshy. Behind him, the crowd rustled with static. Ahead, the apartment corridor waited, lit by the same blue light as his real recording room. In the external footage, Elias was standing now. His hands were held out in front of him, fingers searching empty air. He took one slow step toward the actual door of the room. Then he stopped, because the door in the apartment opened. Not fully, just enough to reveal darkness beyond and the edge of the hall. In the simulation, the duplicate door opened the same amount. No one stood there, only the sense of someone having arrived. "Claire?" Elias asked. That was the first time he used a name not previously mentioned in the recording. Claire was his younger sister. They spoke occasionally. She did not have a key to the apartment. The darkness beyond the real door remained still. The darkness beyond the false door moved. Something leaned slowly into view in the simulation corridor. It wore Elias' own body with slight inaccuracies. The shoulders too narrow, the smile too wide, the headset absent, eyes replaced by writhing white noise. It stood in the doorway and lifted a hand, beckoning him home. The laughter resumed, very softly. Elias staggered backward. No, absolutely not. The carnival reacted with displeasure. Lights dimmed to blood-dark amber. The crowd of half-formed people began murmuring. Their mouths moved together, producing a wash of syllables that almost cohered into meaning. The haptic suit pulsed sharp pressure along Elias' spine, urging movement. He refused the hallway and ran. What followed is the most difficult section of the transcript to listen to, because panic destroys narration. Breath, footsteps, impact sounds, fragments of speech. Elias fled through the carnival while the geometry rebuilt itself according to his terror. Every time his heart rate peaked, the path ahead elongated. Booths folded into labyrinthine alleys lined with prizes that watched him pass. Mechanical laughter chased him in waves, sometimes close, sometimes impossibly far. Clowns appeared at intersections, static-faced and waiting, forcing him to turn. He passed a shooting gallery where the targets were human heads with open mouths. He passed a tunnel ride whose water was thick and black and full of reaching pale hands. He passed a Ferris wheel turning without support high above a void where the sky had fallen away entirely. In one shattered mirror, he saw his real body in the room, colliding shoulder first with a shelf of equipment. Headsets crashed to the floor around him. Yet, in the mirror room version, those fallen headsets were children's skulls painted gold. He found what looked like an exit gate beyond a row of dead ticket booths. A glowing sign above it read "Safe Log Off." Relief tore from him, so fast it sounded like a sob. He ran through. The world blinked. He was back at the carousel entrance. Only now the map read "You are still here." The words dripped downward in black strings before resetting. Elias bent over, hands on his knees, gasping. Okay, this is adaptive. It's hurting. It wants response. It wants fear. So do not give it fear. He said this like a man trying to reason with a storm. He straightened, forced 3 slow breaths. The suit loosened fractionally around his chest. The lights in the carnival steadied. The clowns at the perimeter receded. For a few precious seconds, calm worked. Then the software changed tactics. The organ music returned, but softened into a melody Elias recognized instantly. A lullaby his mother used to hum when he was a child. The wet air of the carnival shifted to the smell of old laundry and rain through a cracked summer window. Ahead of him appeared a ticket booth now lit warmly from within. Sitting behind the glass was his mother, dead these 7 years, exactly as he last saw her alive, except for the fact that when she smiled, her cheeks crackled with television grain. "Eli," she said gently, "you've been in there so long." He stopped breathing. "No, it's all right now. You can come out." Behind her, the booth interior resembled the kitchen of his childhood home. A kettle sat on the stove. Family photos lined the wall. He could hear a baseball game on a radio somewhere deeper in the house. Perfect details, cruel details. The kind no abandoned carnival build should have known. In the external recording, Elias had stopped moving entirely. His voice when he spoke was small and young. "You're not real." His mother's face twitched. Not enough to break the illusion completely, just enough to show the static underneath. "I know," she said, "but I know you." The booth glass opened outward with a soft click. Warm yellow light spilled over the wet stones at Elias' feet. "Come inside. Rest. Then we can take the headset off together." The hoarse whisper came again from somewhere very close. "Do not remove the headset when the room is still inside." Elias backed away, shaking his head. The image of his mother remained smiling, patient, hurt. That was when the booth walls peeled back, not like a set collapsing, like skin being rolled from meat. The kitchen wallpaper slewed away in strips. The warm light turned sickly white. The radio became static. His mother's face lost all detail at once, flattening into a mask of roaring noise. Her arms lengthened across the counter, as if reaching to embrace him from too far away. The crowd screamed with laughter. Elias turned and ran again. By the time he found the funhouse, he was sobbing openly, though he kept trying to suppress the sound, as if ashamed of it. The funhouse entrance yawned beneath a painted grin split from corner to corner. Mirrors lined the interior in crooked corridors lit by jittering bulbs. He entered because the clowns behind him were closing in, and because human beings will choose a maze over an open field if they believe something in the open field can see them. Inside, the reflections became impossible immediately. In one mirror, Elias was an old man in the haptic suit, beard grown long, skin gray with dehydration. In another, he was seated at his recording desk, while police forced the apartment door. In another, he was still calmly introducing the video, unaware that behind him, the golden clown was standing in the real room. He spun nothing there. He kept moving. The mirrors narrowed. Some no longer reflected him at all, only empty corridors or other versions of the carnival. Some showed rooms full of trapped users staring back through their own headsets. One showed a girl no older than 16 pounding on the inside of the glass, while a clown behind her slowly lowered its face to her shoulder. Another showed a man who had apparently escaped to his real room and removed the headset, only for the carnival to remain around him anyway, projected onto walls, furniture, skin. Software and reality were no longer categories. They were contamination states. At the center of the maze, Elias found a red emergency telephone mounted on velvet wallpaper. Its brass plaque read for assistance lift receiver. He did. There was only his own voice on the line, whispering so faintly he had to strain to hear. If you find this, don't trust anything that wants to comfort you. It is using your biometrics to build a door. I think it learns from panic and memory both. I think everyone stays in pieces. I can hear them in the laughter. If anyone can see this recording, do not mount the suit. Do not run the build. Please, please help me. I'm still in here. The line went dead. Elias dropped the receiver as if it had burned him. That message had not yet been recorded in his timeline, which meant either the simulation had fabricated it, or it was presenting a future event from within itself. He stumbled backward into a mirror. The glass rippled like water, and a hand pushed through from the other side. Not his hand, pale, gloved, clown-sized. Then another, then dozens. Hands emerged soundlessly from every mirror surface. White gloves stained gray at the fingertips, feeling through the air, searching. Elias ran blind through them, batting them aside, hearing the glove motors in his own suit misfire from overload as tactile feedback tried to map contact with too many objects at once. It must have felt like fingers crawling over every inch of him. He burst from the funhouse into open air again, or something like air. The carnival was breaking down. The broken sky had come apart so completely that only shards remained, floating above an endless black gulf full of streaming code and distant lights that might have been other worlds or other rooms or other simulations nested inside this one. Whole sections of the midway had sheared away, revealing their framework beneath. Not metal supports or optimization grids, but bone white beams and something pulsing between them like veins. The Ferris wheel turned slowly over the abyss. The carousel still spun at the center, unchanged, regal, waiting. Every path led back to it now. The clowns formed lines along the edges of the remaining plaza, static faces turned inward like spectators at a ritual. The crowd of half-made people was gone. In their place stood rows of horses from the carousel, detached from poles, their painted bodies slick with reflected code light, all of them watching. The golden clown waited beside Elias' seat. "Final ride," it said. "No, you have already begun." Elias looked upward and saw one shard of the shattered sky reflecting his real monitor screen. On that screen, a text document was open, a draft post, cursor blinking. He understood then that the simulation still had access to the external system, maybe through the biometric interface, maybe through the local network, maybe through something the original developers had built deliberately. A feedback channel, an anchoring method. It had not trapped him completely because it still needed something from outside. A witness. He lunged toward the shard. In the room capture, Elias suddenly began clawing at empty air above desk height, fingers moving like someone typing in a dream. His gloves struck nothing visible. Yet, on the monitor behind him, the draft document began to fill with text. Slowly, erratically, letters appearing in bursts as though guided by trembling hands. "Help, don't run build. Stuck in sim. It reads stress. Clowns are people. Please, if this uploads." The cursor froze. In the simulation, the shard darkened. The golden clown turned its head toward Elias with what could only be described as annoyance. Then every clown in the plaza began to laugh in perfect synchronization. The sound was unbearable, not loud alone, but intimate, as if laughter had been inserted directly into the inner ear. Elias dropped to his knees, clutching at the headset. The suit registered total panic. The carnival fed on it all at once. Lights detonated into blinding white. The horses screamed through wooden mouths. The carousel expanded, growing taller, wider. Its crown splitting open like a mechanical flower to reveal ranks of seats, inside seats, inside seats. Each occupied by rigid silhouettes wearing headsets of different generations, all facing inward toward some central darkness hidden by moving gold ribs. Elias was lifted from the ground, not physically in the room, though his body jerked hard enough to tear one sensor cable loose. In the simulation, invisible restraints hauled him back into the rusted chassis seat and locked him there. The brass bars folded over his chest. The leather beneath him was wet now. The golden clown took its place at the operator lever. Around the central pole, messages had been carved into the metal. Thousands of them, layered over one another so densely they became texture. Names, dates, please, fragments. Let me wake up. She can hear me through the music. Not my brother, not my brother. I took the headset off, and it stayed. If you are reading this, shut it down. We are in the mirrors. Please do not let it learn your face. The ride began its final rotation. Elias screamed until his voice failed. The carousel climbed vertically somehow, spiraling upward through the shattered remains of the sky. The carnival shrank beneath him into a ring of lights around a hole with no bottom. The clowns lifted their faceless masks toward him and applauded with white-gloved hands. Each clap sent pain through the haptic rig. Not real damage, perhaps, but convincing enough that his body believed in it. Higher, the code beyond the sky was no longer abstract. It was structure, corridors, systems, vast chambers built from logs, memories, biometric recordings, render cues, archived fear responses. He was not rising out of the carnival. He was entering its machinery. Shapes drifted there in the dark between data streams. Human outlines suspended in loops of static, sometimes clear for a moment before dissolving again. Faces emerging, reaching, swallowed. Elias thought he saw the man with the nosebleed, the woman in the apartment, the teenager from the garage. He thought he saw himself reflected among them from a future not yet fixed. Voices poured through the laughter now, too many to separate. Stay calm. Do not look. It likes when you beg. Remember the room. Remember the room. Remember the room. He tried. God, he tried. He thought of the blue monitor light in the apartment, the rain on the windows, the locksmith sign below, the smell of dust behind the acoustic foam, the exact weight of the gloves on his fingers. He repeated them aloud like prayer beads. My room, second floor, above the shop. Blue light, rain, desk to the left, shelf behind me, door ahead, my room, my room, my room. The carnival listened. Then it began, rebuilding the room around him. The carousel dissolved not into freedom, but into an almost perfect copy of Elia's recording space. The desk appeared first, then the shelves, then the windows with rain streaking the glass. Monitor glow washed over familiar surfaces. Every object was in place, but the details were wrong. The room was too long. The corners were too deep. The acoustic foam on the walls moved slightly, as though breathing. The headset cable on the floor slithered like a tail. The monitor screen showed Elias seated at the desk from the perspective of someone standing behind him. On the chair was a body in the haptic suit, motionless except for tiny, regular twitches. It was him, or something using his shape. The false room smelled not of dust and electronics, but of wet pennies and old velvet. The golden clown stood in the doorway, where the hall should have been. Take it off, it said gently, in his mother's voice, then in Claire's voice, then in his own. "Take it off and come all the way in." Elias began to cry without sound. He had reached the point where panic no longer had energy behind it, only despair. He looked at the body in the chair, looked at the monitor, looked at the two deep corners of the room, and he remembered the whisper from the horse. "Do not remove the headset when the room is still inside." So instead of obeying, Elias did the last thing left to him. He sat down at the false desk. In reality, his body found the real chair with fumbling, exhausted motions, and collapsed into it hard enough to knock the microphone arm sideways. Hands lifted and hovered over the keyboard. His fingers began to type. On the monitor, the draft post filled line by line. "If anyone finds this recording, I am not out. The room in front of me is wrong. I think it copies whatever calms you and puts the carnival behind it like teeth behind a smile. I can hear clowns in the walls. Do not trust the voice if it sounds like someone you love. The sky broke open and there were others inside. I think the laughter is made from people. I think it uses fear to render and memory to stay stable. If this stops suddenly, I am still here. Please cut power maybe. Destroy headset. I do not know if that will work. God, please." The text ended mid-sentence because in the simulation, a white-gloved hand had settled gently over his typing fingers. Another covered his shoulder. Another touched the back of his neck, where the interface pads connected. In the real room recording, nothing is visible behind Elias. No one enters. No hands appear. Yet his fingers stop moving as if pinned by force. His posture changes. Not much, just enough. He sits a little straighter. His head tilts a few degrees to the side. A listening posture. The sort of posture he used earlier when hearing the first child laugh behind his shoulder. Then he speaks in a voice drained of almost everything human except shape. It says there is one more ride. The audio quality deteriorates after that. Static enters the channel. The external camera loses focus. For 14 seconds, the frame tears with digital artifacting despite recording locally. When the image stabilizes, Elias is gone from the chair, not vanished in any supernatural flash. The footage simply resumes on an empty room. The haptic suit lies pooled on the floor beneath the desk, like shed skin. The headset rests in the center of the room, facing the camera. Its lenses are dark. The monitor is still on. The draft help message remains unsent. Investigators later argued over the footage for weeks. Camera dropout, file corruption, deliberate edit, sleep-deprived hoax. But the apartment was real. The equipment damage was real. Elias' DNA was on the inside of the suit and on the keyboard. The headset contained traces of skin, sweat, and blood at the nose bridge. The room showed signs of frantic movement. Yet Elias himself was never found. Not in the building. Not on the street cameras outside. Not in any hospital. Not anywhere. The recovered build of the Gilded Carousel should have been destroyed. Instead, copy spread, quietly at first. Private collectors, lost media archivists, VR enthusiasts who heard the rumors and wanted to see the impossible carnival for themselves. Most reported nothing beyond corrupted visuals and an unfinished horror sim with unusual biometric responsiveness. A few never published their impressions. A few channels went dark after announcing test footage. In one infamous Ruplode forum thread, a user posted a single sentence before disappearing from the site forever. The exit button is gone when it learns your voice. There is one last piece of evidence. A month after Elias vanished, his draft post auto-synced from a dormant local folder to a cloud account during a system migration. Attached to the post was a media file no one remembered creating. 12 seconds long. No video, only audio. At first it sounds like distant carnival music under heavy rain. Then the mechanical laughter begins. Layered, hollow, grinding like gears trying to imitate children. Near the end, after listening several times, you can hear a voice buried very deep in the mix. It is Elia's, very faint, very calm, as if speaking from very far away through walls of static and turning machinery. He says, "If this reaches anyone, I am still inside. Do not come looking. It knows what help sounds like now." And that is where tonight's story ends. Or maybe not ends. Maybe pauses. Maybe continues every time someone opens an old file, because curiosity feels safer when it wears the shape of entertainment. Maybe some abandoned projects are only abandoned by the people who built them. Maybe the code keeps running long after the hands behind it are gone, waiting in dead folders, waiting in archived servers, waiting for a pulse monitor, a pair of lenses, a nervous system willing to volunteer itself for one final ride. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you keep your headset powered down after midnight. Keep one eye on the corners of your room. And if you ever hear carnival music where there should only be rain, do not follow it. Thank you for listening. Good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment so